Rhode Island, what a first half of the year. I say it's time to take a very deep breath. Friends, this is Mike Stenhouse with another episode of In the Dugout. It's our regular video blog where we discuss important issues of the day. And today we have a very special guest. As you know, the In the Dugout format is roughly just casual chat between me and sometimes myself, sometimes people who agree with us, sometimes people from the other team who don't. And we just simulate as if we're in a dugout before the game, just shooting the ball about life, politics, whatever. Today, Ray Rickman, who is clearly a member of the other team in that he's a liberal left. We are conservative right. But Ray has become a good friend of mine over the years. He's an honest man. He's a good man. We hold very different views, and we're going to have a very interesting discussion with him about race relations. He's a black Rhode Islander, steeped in the history of Rhode Island and the country, and one of the foremost African-American advocates in the state. And we're going to talk about race relations and what's going on in our country and in our state, especially with the name plantations being sought to be removed from our official title. But first, I want to give you a verbal opinion piece that's going to appear in the Rhode Island Echo, the print newspaper, the free paper, beginning late June, early July. And I think it's a good segue into what we're talking about today. And it has that theme I just talked about of taking a breath. You know, in my view, 2020 has been the year of the breath. Just look at the numbers themselves. 2020. Another way to look at that would be, or 2020 would be 2020. 02 signifying air, this air theme. So the numbers itself signify air, oxygen. You know, first the COVID-19 virus infected our lungs. You know, then came forced quarantines, often in diseased air, as we now know. Our economy was suffocated with shutdowns and regulations. Mandated masks inhibited our ability to breathe freely. George Floyd was brutally deprived of his life's breath, rightfully spurring peaceful protests. However, fake protests strangled our streets, rioted, looted, and set property afire, consuming even more oxygen, and stole away the last breaths of others. The first half of 2020 has been all about bad air. I mean, really bad O2. Now it's time to take a breath of fresh air. The pandemic hopefully is dying out. We've been freed from shelter-in-place mandates. Our economy is poised to rebound. The constant need for masks seems to be diminishing. George Floyd's murderers are behind bars. Peaceful protests mostly have returned. We all need to take a breath and remember what originally brought us together as a nation, a thirst for freedom and trust in God. The police must take a breath and rethink the use of deadly force. The protesters should take a breath, do their homework, and understand that the narrative of systematic police racism and brutality has been overblown by agenda-driven groups yearning for their own individual or collective power. The rest of us need to take a breath too and acknowledge that real problems do exist, that we must listen to our brothers and sisters and take a renewed look at their concerns. We can no longer downplay or ignore legitimate cries for justice. And society must take a breath and realize that just because there are racial problems that do require fixing does not mean that America is a racist nation. Conversely, we must relearn to love our country, our founding principles, and our Constitution, all of us. A Constitution that was specifically designed to overcome bias and oppression. Even as imperfect and corrupt humans have often failed to implement these noble ideals. This is not the time to kneel in supplication to the impure among us who do not share our values and who seek to divide us for political gain. No, instead, this is the time to take a breath of pure, clean O2. And remember that only by working together to address our flaws within the rule of law can we ever become a truly united country again. This is also not the time to breathlessly demand defunding of law enforcement. Take a breath, and realize that without police, your life and security are in far greater danger. Crony prosecutors and law enforcement officials must also take a breath and realize that when they delay or deny justice, they will lose the trust of the people, as we have seen, not just for themselves, but for our entire system. It's time for politicians and civil rights leaders to take a breath too and take a new look at the roots of today's maladies: poverty, unequal education, injustice, just to name a few. Who's really responsible for these? Which political philosophy and which group of people or philosophy offers the best way out? Therefore, voters should also take a deep breath and honestly consider who is merely feeding them words and handouts so as to barely survive versus those who represent the path to real reform that empowers all people to thrive. We can only hope that the second half of 2020 brings us a true dose of good, fresh O2 air, but only if we stop and take a breath, a very deep breath, and breathe in that good O2 air. We will survive the 2020 bad air if we can be free to take the breaths that we choose for ourselves, not forced upon us by mobs, by political leaders, by anyone else but ourselves. As we purge the coronavirus from our population and rebuild our suppressed economies, let us also remember the core principles, the liberty-giving O2 air for which we once fought together, built history's greatest nation, and then perpetuated and further freed that nation after a great civil war. We don't need another civil war. So let us resolve that for the rest of 2020, to breathe that fresh O2 air of freedom and to demand that our government work equally for all Americans. So as I mentioned at the top, we're about to have a discussion with a very interesting man. He is a civil rights leader in Rhode Island. He's an African-American advocate who, although probably self-described as liberal, would disagree with me and our center on many issues. I consider him a friend, and more importantly, someone I'm confident I can always have an open-minded discussion with. We trade ideas quite frequently. Ray Rickman is co-founder and executive director of Stages of Freedom, a nonprofit that provides African-American cultural programs to thousands of Rhode Islanders of all races. He's a former state representative from the Providence area and served as Rhode Island Deputy Secretary of State from 2000 to 2002, the highest office ever held by an African-American in our state's history. That's something else. And he's a longtime member of the Rhode Island Parole Board. So I'd like you to meet Ray Rickman. Ray, welcome to our show.
Thank you for the invite.
Well, you know our tradition first. We got to wear our jerseys or caps. So I'm going with my Red Sox today. You're from Detroit, but what do you have for us, Ray?
I have a Providence Police Department baseball cap.
Well, that's pretty appropriate for the time we're in.
I didn't play baseball, Mike, because I'm not all that capable, but I was on the supportive end of the mayor's team.
All right. Well, that's good enough for us. I'll wear the Red Sox. You wear the Providence PD, and that's awesome. So, Ray, you put out a press release yesterday praising the governor for her executive actions in removing the word plantations from any correspondence or public-facing issues with our state's name. Tell us why you think that is important.
So, racism has 1,000 faces, and most people don't see most of them. When this came on the ballot, as you remember before,
right,
the voters thunderly destroyed it, turned it down and said, we need to keep this, it's our history. And also Senator Metz and Representative Almeida, they're exaggerating about what all this means. And then, of course, the two conservative historians came up with the definition of plantation. And the definition is, brand new, great, wide open space. And that definition was created about 1600, because when they came to Cuba and the Caribbean, people would get 5,000 to 10,000 acre farms but they weren't farms. You know, in Europe, your farm's 20 acres. And so they came up with a new word for it, literally, in about 1600, a little after. And that term was good for about 20, 30, 40 years. And all of those people discovered they needed African slaves and a few Native American slaves to farm their 50,000 acres. And so you see as early as 1690 that the definition is a place with unpaid labor. And then it gets worse, you know, slave farm.
We know there's that argument that it really doesn't necessarily imply slaves, but obviously you're saying history would show us otherwise.
I'm saying in today's mind, probably 90% of people believe a plantation is a slave place. Okay. And so you don't have to, you know, do you know the average person has about 9 names when they go through life? The name is William and Willie and Will and Guillaume and my little man and all these names you have. And they change their meaning sometimes. And you get to be 18 and you say, don't call me Willie anymore.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And that's what this is. It's an innocent word that got a bad connotation, and then it got the worst connotation in the world, you know, right up there with concentration camps. And folks refuse to own up to it and rid ourselves of it, and they should have, because it's...
Why is it important, Ray? Why are symbolic gestures important? Does it actually help anyone's life, or is it pure symbolism?
They're not symbolic. When you're insulted regularly, daily, in your face, and other people aren't, it weighs on you.
You really take it as an insult.
So the Providence Journal the other day decided to capitalize the word B on black. There's been an argument since 1971, and after 50 years, they caved. The Journal didn't cave. The new owners caved. They said, come on, let's do it. And so every time you pick up the paper, you see Italian American, capital, Greek American, capital, and in that same paragraph or sentence, Black American, small b, because people argue and it's a color, it's not a whatever. I said, well, if it's color, use African American. Okay, if you don't want to capitalize it, don't use it. But every Black person on the planet's insulted by it, and most white folks think it's normal.
All right, so that leads into a discussion I know you wanted to have. So what really is racism? What really is racist? Mm-hmm. You know, we had this discussion off air, and I want our viewers to hear it. So to me, racism is what the definition says. It's a some kind of determinant that human traits and capacities are determined by your race, and that one race may be superior or inferior to another race. So that's kind of an intent kind of thing, that unless you have that purposeful intent of, in this case, placing the black community as inferior to some other community, just because somebody else might be insulted by something, does that really make it racist?
Yes. So you answer the question for me. This is a fabulous history. Rhode Island, 3 centuries of democracy. And it covered 300 years. I think it stops in about 1920. And it is fabulous. And this is done by Charles Carroll. He has degrees from every place. And let me tell you the year. I love this show because we're not in any rush to solve the world's problems. We're talking 1922. And this book is 1,300 pages. And this is 1820 to 1920, the history of Rhode Island.
Okay.
And in this entire book, there is not a mention of a single Black person. Not a single Black person is in this book. Did he do it on purpose, or is he an ignorant scholar? That's a question to you.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, if he did it on purpose, to me, that would be racist. If he just didn't think about it and didn't do it, then to me, it wouldn't be. But that would be my answer.
It is racism because Black folks were 8-9% of the population of the state. They had helped build this state, and they don't exist in probably the most important history book written. They don't exist.
So you're saying things can be implicitly racist even if there's no racist
Intent.
All right, we might disagree on that, but it's a very
You
interesting.
leave a people out. Now you're just old enough, but before about 1970, there's virtually no positive images of blacks anyplace. Aunt Jemima hasn't even been fixed yet. And black folks cannot appear on the cover of magazine, of any fashion magazine, anything really. And when they do appear, they're liable to be stereotypically unattractive, uninteresting, awful. This nation did this. In the last centuries before, you go back and Frederick Douglass is about the only positive image you'll ever see in a nation with 10, 12 million black people. That was the policy. That was the policy.
Yeah, but where do you draw the line, Ray? I mean,
no, when you're teaching that people don't.
Take a commercial, like watch TV today, right? Watch TV, and almost every commercial features a biracial couple or a.
I saw one the other day.
Right, and almost every commercial that has a family. So are you saying that if you don't include, multiple races in a commercial or some, or, I'm taking it to an extreme, is that racist?
No, I was giving you two examples. I was saying when people don't exist, which we didn't exist before about 1970, and or when everybody's ugly and disfigured and looking like a criminal, which was also the case. And so an awful lot of people who are 50, 60, 70 years old grew up with that. That's who black people are. And they're never like you're talking about now. Now, I will tell you, you're absolutely right. In the last 10 years, you see this not only improvement. In the last 2 or 3 years, they get an A- on inclusion in letting all kinds of black people show up, Native Americans.
Yeah, and I have no problem with that. I'm just asking, but if you don't
but I'm telling you how new it. I'm telling you how new it is.
Yeah.
I saw an interracial couple on a ad the other day with no mention, no nothing. That's the way the world should be, because 3-4% of people are interracially married.
Yeah.
And you never would have seen that 5 years ago. Never, 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 never. And if you did, it would have been in a movie where it was featured.
Yeah.
How are we going to get to the promised land if we're not all treated well? That's all. Just well.
I disagree with that.
No, racism is the result. It is not the intention.
Okay.
Wait, and do I feel sorry or am I less accusatory of people who don't know what they're doing? Yes. I went to a yard sale in Pawtucket about 4 or 5 years ago, and a little kid of 6 or 7 came to the door and said, Grandpa, there's a nigger here to buy something. And I threw my head back, and the person I was with was outraged. And I said, well, if he was 1 year older, but he's been sitting at that table with his grandfather.
So that's a good segue into my next question. So obviously there are bigots out there, obviously, who teach their kids horrible stuff like that. But is it so if you look at the Black Lives Matter movement, you look at the protests and riots and everything else that's going on in our country right now, do you really believe that there is that systematic, entrenched institutional racism, or do you believe it's isolated pockets of bigots like that kid who knocked on the door?
So, and again, let me tell you, I'm sympathetic to the kid because he's carrying a heavy weight. And hopefully he's going to get over it. But anyway, so Mike, because you're a brilliant man and you're leading a movement in this state, I keep wanting to throw questions back to you.
Sure. This is what a dugout chat is. Go ahead.
The governor has 55 staff people, all white. in a state 24% minority. Now, we know she likes Yaleys a lot, and she had a black Yalie on her staff.
She doesn't like me as a Harvard guy, I'll tell you that.
Well, she likes Yaleys. Harvard's not good enough. I don't think Brown's good enough. But anyway, is that racism?
I think it's highly insensitive, and I think in today's world, for someone who takes the position she holds, it's hypocritical. I don't know if it's racist, but it's clearly hypocritical.
And that one's tough on me because I think a Democratic governor who got over the finish line with Black and Latino votes, she would not, if she had to depend on the white vote, she would not have been elected governor of Rhode Island.
I was stunned when I saw that story. I was just stunned, yeah.
Yeah. And so these kind of Democrats should be ashamed of themselves. Now, I sat in the General Assembly when we had 100 members 20 years ago, and they voted on law and order, mass incarceration bills. And I'm going to say something, get me in trouble with my friends, but several of the black members voted right along with the white members, 98-1, 98-2, all the time, to do the dumbest things that you could imagine that would affect people of color more than they would affect white people. The criminalization of something, selling marijuana in certain places. They had 2 or 3 of them every year. And then they would brag they were tough on law and order. And I'd say, yep, the 5 people you arrest for that, and you give them 4 times the time in prison, yeah, you're tough on law and order, but we're not fixing the crime problem.
Right.
And so mass incarceration's racist, because if they didn't know it the day they voted on it, 5 years later, the prison statistics showed them that
even though they didn't know it, you would.
Wait, I said, no. I said
people who vote on it or the law itself.
No, laws are made by legislators.
Okay.
I said if they didn't know it the day they voted, they knew it 5 years later. Okay. And it took them 25 years, both Republicans and Democrats, to begin to undo it. And it should have taken them, again, if I want to be nice, after 5 years, because you get the prison statistics every year, you would see that 90% of the people arrested under mass incarceration are Latino and Black because they're street crimes and they're dumb things.
Yeah,
but
and
also,
you worked on the Justice Reinvestment Plan Act a few years ago, and we were proud to stand with everybody, left, right, Republican, Democrat, to help move that along.
But Mike, let me remind you, it's 3 crimes of any kind. So you steal 3 bicycles and you end up with 6-7 years in prison.
I got you.
And
there's still work to do, is what you're saying.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
No. But let me try to finish the answer to this question.
All right.
Racism is when a group of people, particularly of a certain race, get harmed. And in America, that's not supposed to be the intention in the land of the free.
Did you say harmed?
Hurt.
Yeah.
Yes. It's not supposed to be the intention. You're supposed to go to prison at the same rate as anyone else who commits the crime. And I served on the parole board, which you mentioned. I've never been in a more racist operation in my life. That rich white people.
Racist by intent or racist by result?
Well, they've seen the results. You asked a very interesting question. They'd seen the results for 20, 30 years. So it has to become intent.
So they don't intend to do anything about it. So racist can be lack of action.
Oh, no, it's the opposite. Did you know that if you kill someone with your car, that is not manslaughter, it is not murder 1, 2, 3, or anything. It is death resulting from vehicle.
Vehicular homicide?
Yeah, which is not even, no way comes up to manslaughter. So you can be as drunk as a skunk and then see somebody you don't like, and we had cases like that, and you run up on the sidewalk and kill them. Now, this is shocking, but about 80% of these things are done by young white people in their brand new car at 18 years old. And they have their 3 buddies in the car, and they're as drunk as the day, and they kill somebody. And they get a year often home confinement in their house. Be careful. I always joke, I'm going to run
Yeah,
for
but
secretary.
would that apply differently to a black man than a white
Yes,
man, a black
yes.
woman, or a white woman?
Yeah, well, first, most of that
I
drunk
mean, we
drive.
know our laws are terribly inconsistent with drugs and all kinds of things. We know
No,
that.
I'm going
But
to tell you something that any police officer you know will tell you is true. Okay? 55-year-olds and 65-year-olds, when they're drunk, they get their car in the middle of the road and they go 15 miles an hour getting home. They're very skilled and careful at drunk driving. And when you get a 19-year-old, they do foolish things. So age often has something to do with drunk driving. I'm sorry, with what a drunk driver does. I mean, there are more older drunks driving than young. So, but let me come back to my point. I must have had 15 cases of 21-year-old, 25-year-old, including one at Brown University that hurt my heart so bad. A young kid from, I won't even say what college, I don't want to blame them, from a college, drunk on a Saturday night on Thayer Street near Brown, ran up on the sidewalk, and a young man, 18 years old, just started Brown, with his new girlfriend, pushed her out of the way, car flattened him and killed him. The person driving the car had been driving drunk since 1 o'clock in the afternoon. This was 8 o'clock at night. They'd been in 7 bars. He got 1 year in jail and came before the parole board and got out. Right. And I don't remember a single black person getting out, and I don't remember a single black person getting a year in jail for something like that.
So
Wait, and Mike, at the end of the story is, it hurt my heart so badly because this young man had a twin brother, and he came to the hearing, and I thought it was him from my folder.
oh yeah,
And
right.
you talk about what a job it did on me.
Yeah.
And then an
Right.
hour
So
later,
I want to wrap this up. So
Yep.
when you, all right, so you've just educated me a little bit. So when Black Lives Matter is protesting, quote, systematic racism, to you, it means all of these things that you just talked about, right? Laws that might unfairly impact one race, parole judgments that might impact one race, incarceration term, right? So is that just quickly, is that when the term systematic racism is out there, is that what you think of? This whole, all these subtle, little, but very important.
well, don't call them little, because if you get 5 years in
very
jail and
important.
someone else gets 1,
No, I got you.
not
No, I
little.
agree. Yeah.
And I went to a high school that practiced racism all day long. The 3 or 4 black kids had to sit in the back of the room. The teachers wouldn't answer our questions. And our school yearbook was called The Aryan. And I can go on and on and on. And I became famous in Detroit for leading a walkout. So those are brutal things. They're not little. And I don't think they've really harmed me, but they have harmed people.
I got you.
They really have.
But in its entirety, that's what systematic racism is, all these kinds of things.
The principal and the school board knew what our teachers did to us.
Okay. So when you see the Black Lives Matter protests, these other protests and riots and statues being torn down and whatnot in the name of systematic racism, do you think those protesters have put as much thought as you have into this? Do you think
No.
that's motivating them?
No, I think I want to be careful with this. I'm a historian. I know things.
I know you are, and that's my next question to you, but go ahead.
Yeah, I know things. And the average person doesn't. The Speaker of the House, who's a very intelligent man, he doesn't get the credit he deserves, said
Nicholas Mattiello.
Yes, said something ridiculous the other day about his lack of knowledge about slavery being the basis of the economic uppin of the state of Rhode Island.
Yep,
And
I saw that quote.
Yep, 20 years ago, 90% of white folks would have said that and 50% of black folks. So he's just a little behind the times. And now he'll never do that again because he got a quick education. I wish everybody could get that education. I really do.
I know.
And the protesters are they know what racism is. They know what the problems are. Do they know the deep underpinnings? Do they understand police training? Do they understand all these things? No, but sometimes, hey, you understand what is affecting you, and
All right. So,
but Mike, I watched them go to the state house and the governor with Black Lives Matter, young people, and a few middle age, and the governor's promising what you call symbolic, but she's promising to remove plantations, her power as far as she can go legally, and they're all thrilled. I would, I try not to be militant, but I would have said, and how about the appointment of a black judge to the Supreme Court while you're doing it? Something more substantial.
all right, we can come back to that, but I got a line of thought I'm trying to get to. So as a historian, and you don't even have to be a historian to much of one to know what I'm going to ask you. When you see statues of Lincoln and Grant, Teddy Roosevelt, all of whom largely could be categorized as friends of the abolitionist movement or of minorities, even though they may have had some imperfection in their past, even defacement of churches, even Jesus being statues talked about being torn down because he was white and therefore must be a symbol of white supremacy. I mean,
I'm sorry, Jesus.
Any imperfection that could be conceived in some way as racist mean we ought to be tearing down these statues and symbols?
So first, let me tell you, I'm a liberal, and you know that.
Yeah.
So I'm very slow to put anybody in jail for property crimes. Now, I'm not talking about setting a building on fire. You should go to jail for that. That's arson, and you could have killed somebody. But breaking windows and the like, I want to fine you. I might do house arrest. Who knows? But I'm not much in favor of prison. I believe you should not destroy public property. And there is a process which...
But private property is okay to destroy?
Oh, no. But they're generally destroying public property right now.
Well, tell the business owners that. Okay.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was right there. Stages of Freedom is downtown.
Okay.
And they must have messed with 40 businesses, and it was only by the grace of God.
They recognize that. Good. Yeah, that's great.
So I don't believe in any violence. I'm a non-violent kind of a person.
But even the judgment, even if they don't tear down the statue, the judgment that these people are not worthy to be in the public square just because of some perceived imperfection, is that really the right way to think about this?
So let's start with the Confederate folks who are treasonous and destructive of the nation. And we also know that most of those statues were put up after 1890.
And they themselves were revisionist history. So let's stipulate that. I'm with you. Let's agree for the sake of I'm with you on that. But what about these other ones like Lincoln, Grant, and all that?
No, but see, Michael, here we go. You're trying to do something you shouldn't be doing.
What's that?
Columbus is an evil person. And Columbus was sanctified weirdly by the Anglo-Saxon community. After in about the 1880s, they decided to make Plymouth Rock and the Pilgrims and Columbus the symbol of the nation. And so they got all these statues up. And this statue we have was done by Gorham for World's Fair. And it's a stunning piece of art. And I recommend that I ask the director of the Providence of Rhode Island School of Design to take it in and put a big sign on it saying, explaining. And he declined. He said it belongs in the History Museum, in spite of it being Gorham design. So I'm not big on destroying. I'm against destroying art.
But I'm talking about the moral judgments being made on these people's histories. The moral
Christopher Columbus was an evil man. And ask any Native American.
According to who?
According to the Queen of England. The Queen of Spain.
Here's what I'm getting at, Rick.
No. If anybody reads the history, they will see what this man did. Now, it's pretty hard to be a discoverer and not do bad things. And he was extraordinarily evil to Native Americans. Now, if somebody wants to say he's a great explorer and a murderer, fine. I'm willing to accept that. Do you belong in the public square? We're sanctifying you, and you represent all of us. And sometimes your time has come and gone, and his has come and gone. Native Americans have been saying this for 40 years, and then a few people join in.
So
and right now,
you can point to the extreme examples, and I can point to the non-extreme examples like Lincoln.
no, Lincoln's
Go ahead, but here's the question.
Lincoln's a problem.
Here's the question. Who are these people to be making moral judgments about anybody? You're a Christian man.
They're not. They're supposed to go to the legislature.
Jesus said, let him without sin cast the first stone. Who are these people to declare themselves the authorities to decide who's moral and who's not, who's justified and who's not to be in the public square, who's going to have a positive? Who anointed them?
Oh, no.
Angels and the saviors of our society.
No, you're right. You're putting this at too high a level.
No, I'm not really. You want to know how our side looks at it?
Mike, it's not your side.
It is our side.
No, there is a law. And normally the law or decision about honoring someone's made by city council. And that's where it's supposed to be made.
Okay, who are these?
These people you're talking about, no, they're wrong. They're supposed to take it to the Providence City Council or the Boston
That was my next question.
Wait. And in this day, they'll get 14 or 15 votes on the Providence City Council.
At least we had a democratic process, right?
And that's orderly, responsible, respectful, and not wasting my police resources.
I agree.
So we don't have any disagreement, but we do have a disagreement about who is moral and moral in what time. And Lincoln's a complex person because even the Emancipation Proclamation said, I'll give you time. You can keep your slaves if you quit fighting. And then he went on with other things in there. It's not a pure, clean document.
Well, is anybody pure and clean? That's my point.
Yes. Eleanor Roosevelt. I can name you a few.
I'm certainly not. Are you?
Let me tell you what.
This is my point.
I'm not in favor of slavery.
Humans are
I'm not in favor of... hold on. There are extremes.
Of course there are.
And Lincoln was a complex figure. I'm almost an authority on Lincoln. And he was very complex. Now, these statues are complex too. Lincoln is, up sometimes on a horse. He wasn't even a horseman. Yes, he was. But anyway, Lincoln is up and the slaves are down. And he's looking down and freeing them. Now, that's the artist's interpretation of what went on. And should they have been standing up? I think this gets complex. I am not in favor of destroying any public statue at any time. And people ought to, and these statues, the Gorham Christopher Columbus would cost $300,000 or $400,000 to make. And you want to hear something? You catch people destroying it, they ought to have to pay. And so by the way, I would sell it.
What's the standard then, Ray? What's the standard?
Don't destroy public statues.
No. What's the standard on deciding what we take to the, who's a bad person, who's a good person, who's going to make that standard, and what do we bring to the city council? We both agree that a democratic process is really the only way we should be doing this, but what should be the standard?
So I wanted to name a street after Edward and Cotell Bannister, famous artist, famous abolitionist wife. And I didn't do it for years because I couldn't find a street. And then one day I'm in front of the Brown Faculty Club and I realized the street's named after a slave captain. And what took me so long to realize that. And I went to the city council and they stripped his name off in one hearing and they put the Bannisters' names on. Citizen initiated, the council voted 15-0. That's how it should be done. And anybody has a right, conservative, moderate, liberal, leftist, to ask for honorific street naming, park naming, anything, and see what the governmental body will do.
So one of the concerns, again, from people I talk with is where does this end? Where do we draw the line? And so I'm going to ask the question this way. Is there an implicit bargain here? If we take plantations out of the, officially out of the name of the state of Rhode Island, if we democratically vote to take down this statue or that symbol, is there some bargain here? Does Al Sharpton all of a sudden stop inciting violence? Does
I don't think he
protest stop? What is the, why would we want to do this? Why?
I don't think the Reverend,
Or is there no, is it a one-way street?
hold on, I don't think the Reverend incites violence. And by the way, anything can end up in violence. All you need is one person doing drugs or having some drinks on the edge.
So what's the bargain then?
There is no bargain.
What are you saying to us? Again, I don't mean to say, what are they saying to?
Well, you can say me, because I'm going to give you the answer.
You're going to give
I'm going to give you the answer that.
What are you saying to me?
You think I'm a radical? Okay.
No, I'm asking you why do.
I'm going to tell you what should happen. So in Providence, they did that study, and then the governor took the school system and gave it to the state, because they did a study. And in the study, they found out the majority of the teachers dislike the kids that they're paid to teach. They dislike them. And they didn't, I've talked to a couple of people who did the research, and they didn't use the word racist because they thought it would hurt the conversation. So they said dislike, dislike, dislike. But they don't like the Latino kids. And the number one reason they don't like them is their parents' lack of English skills. And I never heard of punishing a kid because of their parents. Crazy. But that was the kind of dominant thing. So they don't want to be in these schools. And I thought to myself, if I were in school board, I would give every single teacher free lunch. Hemingway's, free lunch. Go there and sit down for an hour and a half with your spouse, your lover, your children, whoever, and come up with a 3-year plan. Where shall I be in 3 years? Should I be teaching in Warwick, East Greenwich? Should I go work in the bank? I hate these kids. I need to get out. Now that's what I want. I want everything we see that is destructive to people of color to be dealt with. Now, how do we get 1,000 things dealt with? I don't know. But no, I think it's a one-way street, because for 400 years, it has been a one-way street. That's not true. I don't want to overstate. This is America.
I hear your point. That's okay. You're speaking.
No, the arch of freedom, the arch of justice swings towards freedom. Ask women who can vote for 100 years this year, but couldn't in the first 150 years.
So can in a one-way street, Ray, can the oppressed obtain that justice, that equality, and that, I guess what you're kind of saying is payback, in a sense, reparation, something, without the oppressed then oppressing the oppressors? Oh,
the oppressed, if you're going to call us that, don't have the power. And
well, it seems to me that they have it right now.
So I'll tell you what I would tell every single Black and Latino person in this state. Don't vote for this governor ever again. She has an all-white staff, and she doesn't have a single white person on that staff that is connected to the Asian, Native American, Black, or whatever. Because you can have a whole bunch of white folks who, you know, who think about people when they sit down at the corporation. When her folks sit at corporation, they figure out how to help businesses from out of state or tech companies generally run by white people. That's their experience. So we have to use whatever power we have, and we haven't been very good at it in Rhode Island, really. Michigan had its first Black judge in 1844. We had ours in 1982, one. And we're not very good at it, and we haven't had white allies. Now, I live on a street on the top of College Hill, and every Friday and Saturday, 150, maybe 200 white 19-year-olds walk by, 16-year-olds walk by my house, coming back from the State House and protest. Those are allies. And you watch them vote, not just them, but pressure their mother. You watch them vote on plantations in the fall. It's going to pass to remove it. And it should be removed, because I've always believed this. When anything has a bad influence or connotation, we ought to be willing to get rid of it, not look for technicalities why we have to stick with it, or that someone's asking for too much.
As I said in my opening commentaries, we, whites, conservatives, whatever we are,
Yes.
need to be more understanding and accepting that while we see these things, or some of us may see these things as small or insignificant, that they're not to you and they're not to others like you, and that we've got to be more sensitive to that. If they serve no purpose in society, I think preserving history is one thing, but if they serve no other purpose in society, we got to be sensitive if they're painful to people. So I want to move on to a new area, the objective. The reason we brought you on, the reason I consider you a friend and a great person to talk to about, because your intentions are honest. What you say you believe in, I know that from my heart. I don't think I can say that for a lot of national people. So Larry, if you could bring up the second image. Ray, you haven't seen this. If it's a little provocative, but I think that's what we have to talk about. I was listening to the radio just yesterday, a guy I'd never heard of before. And he said he's apparently a Black American, and he wrote a book, The Iron Triangle. And if you read the subtitle of the book, which will be on your screen here in just a second, how the Democrats are using race to divide Americans in their quest for power and how we can stop them. And he was basically saying that many in the minority community are being used as part of a larger agenda to promote whatever you want to call it, Democrat victories or socialism or a globalist agenda, and that racism is the emotional way to build support for this larger agenda that really doesn't care about Black people the way you do. What would you say to somebody like this guy, Vince Everett Ellison?
Mm-hmm. Let's say that he's half right. He might be more than half right. But I hope, and I'm going to go grab the book, give him some money. It wasn't my plan, but I might ask the library to buy it. And
yeah,
no, because then more people read it. No,
he's a pretty provocative guy,
Okay. I'm going to go get the book and I'm going to read it. I believe that Democrats have done as little as they can for people of color. And this is certainly since Clinton was president. There are some times, Lyndon Johnson in particular, in which Democrats have done enough or a lot, but not enough to change this country. And then they lay off. And we're just talking about the governor of Rhode Island, liberal, northern state, with an all-white staff. And again, I'm not trying to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people a job. I'm more interested in policy, who's in the room, and decisions are being made, and their life experiences. So I believe Republicans, not since the passage of the civil rights bills, when they were as good, actually better, than Democrats in the passage of the 64 and the 65 civil rights bill. Without Republicans, they never would have passed, because 2/3 of the Democratic Party in the U.S. Senate were Southern Dixiecrats, born segregationists, publicly racist. And so the Republican Party was playing a different role 40 and 50 years ago. Now we come to today, in which I think the Republican Party, a few, I don't know what percentage, but a certain percentage of Republicans are racist, publicly awful, blocking, doing as little as they can. And Democrats now, in the last 2 years, they love Black people and are claiming that they're going to do something. I have seen very little yet, and all the blame goes to McConnell. They blame everything they can't do in the Congress on him. If he's gone and there's another Republican leader, or if the Democrats get control of the Senate, what will we see? I'll give you my favorite example, and I might be off a couple of pennies, and someone's going to say that Rickman is an idiot. The national minimum wage, I believe, is $7.75. And the Democrats have had control of the Congress 3 times more than the Republicans. And that's the national minimum wage. In most states, it's $10, $11, $12. A couple places, it's $15. You can't live on $7 and whatever. And 4 states tie their minimum wage to the federal government.
There are plenty of social programs out there to supplement that, aren't there, Ray?
No, you
No,
can't live on $7 and whatever cents, even if you have something else. But it's a disgrace.
no, that's another
Wait,
issue.
wait, wait, I want you to agree with me, Mike. The Democrats are in charge, and the minimum wage is $7.75. This goes to your author's, to Ellison's point. Democrats have misused Black people, taken their votes. Anything from 80 to 95% of Black people vote for Democrats all the time. And
Well, we know that
we get
both parties are subject to special interest influence,
yeah,
whatever.
right. That's
We
why
know that, and that's
they're
probably
protecting McDonald's. The Democratic Party's protecting McDonald's with the minimum wage. So corporate giants have a lot of power with a
yeah,
lot
they're part
of
of the special interest that influence both parties. All right, so I want to take that and segue to our final topic: education, because I think that on the minimum wage, just to state our or my view on it, minimum wage should be stepping stone jobs. They should not be jobs that people should try to live on and raise a family on. And that if you have a good enough education and the skills, you don't have to be into a minimum wage job in an ideal world, right? It's not an ideal world. I get that. And you shouldn't have to use it for anything other than a part-time or a stepping stone job. And if you had the better education, better job skills, better training, life skills, you could quickly move past any minimum wage job into something more self-supporting. Okay, so education. You know that I'm sincere on this. We have been pushing. We believe that it's a tragedy in this state that so many kids, especially minority kids, are receiving such substandard education. We have tried. We're not education experts, but we do know that there is public policy out there that can help any of those families. Educational freedom that empowers parents with more choices, with public funding to follow students to whatever school they want to go to, regardless of whether it's public or private. We know that it's a special interest group, the powerful teachers unions and their allies, who are blocking this. In many states, we have such choice, and families are free to get their kids a better education. So there's two parts of that. There's a new program that we're just going to be putting a policy brief on, maybe as soon as tomorrow, this week, that I haven't told you about. But the traditional programs that would give families the power to send their kids to any school of their choice. What is your position on that, Ray?
make sure you make that for September 2021.
I would love it to be in September.
No. I'm saying there's a mess going on right now. We have to figure out what school anybody can get to in the September of this year because of COVID-19.
Right. Oh, I get you. Yeah. But overall, how do you feel about educational freedom for parents?
So let me go back and give you an example of something. Then I'll answer you directly.
Okay.
I know 3 or 4 people who wanted to go to X-ray technician school. And there's one in Attleboro that costs about $4,000. And they work minimum wage, McDonald's, Wendy's, wherever they work. And they could learn this skill. But it's 6 weeks, 8 hours a day, no messing around. And if you miss 3 days, you don't get a certificate. It's partially a trick to make you come back a second time, but it may be legit too, because you have to learn these things. So they can't go because they have to quit their job to go to this full-time training school. X-ray technicians start at about $50 and go to $75,000, $80,000. And it's a learnable skill. And every hospital is short 2 or 3 people. So you can it's full employment. So we need a fund that would fund them to go. And we have no such fund. Everything you see is to go to college, that you don't have time to go, and you never gives you 100% of the money anyway. And then 3/4 of the time, what do you do with the college degree? You don't do anything with it. So
well, our program as designed would use existing funds to be able to send high school kids into trade schools at the high school level, vocational schools there, and fund that. Would that be acceptable?
That's what we need, but they need to be quality trade schools.
Well, of
And,
course.
and no,
But
real
again,
quality.
it's up to the parents to decide, not you, not me, not some
No,
government
but you want me
channel.
to answer the second part of the question.
That's what I said. We give parents the choice to decide what's the best school, what's a quality school.
Yeah.
That's what
But
education is
Mike,
proven is.
no, you're trying to get me to answer the second part. I'm almost done with the first part.
Okay, go ahead.
It is very difficult to get an education when you're poor, when you have a low income. And
Yes.
even if you could borrow the money, you're frightened to go 20, 50,
Yes.
$100,000 in debt.
Yeah.
And you don't have a grandparent. I live in a neighborhood full of rich people, and every other kid has a grandparent buying them a car on the 17th birthday. I mean, it's unbelievable. And the folks I'm talking about don't have anything like this, and no government paying any serious attention to them. So that's the first half of it. We need to figure out how people can get an education. We really
That's what our educational scholarship programs are all about. Exactly that, Ray. You don't need new funds.
I'd be glad to look at it
Okay.
again.
Here's the second piece. Here's the side. Now, the unions, the reason we know that doesn't work, even though it makes ultimate sense, is because the unions don't want kids leaving public schools, because that means if you reduce the enrollment, you reduce the teachers, that's fewer union paying teachers who are paying dues.
Mhm.
And that's why, that's the only reason unions afford it, because they don't want their dues to go down. They also say it hurts public schools, but it doesn't. Every study in the world shows that school choice does not hurt public schools. Here's the new one I'm coming up with that I have not found an argument against yet, and that it just was developed by a think tank in Pennsylvania in the last week or two. We're putting out a quick policy brief on it. We're taping this on a Thursday, hopefully tomorrow on Friday. They're called, I'm calling them catch-up scholarship accounts. We know that children, after the schools were shut down, and rightfully so, who missed time, and really you couldn't make up all the curriculum online, or they didn't attend all their classes, they probably fell behind from where they should be at this point in their career. And so while it's tough enough just to get the education they would normally get, to try to catch up. So what we're saying is take 150 million of the unspent federal money that's come to Rhode Island in the CARES Act. Is about according to the journal, about 358 million unspent. We would need a third to a half of that at most, to give every family who qualifies, probably not high income families, $500 or $1,000 funded by that money to go spend however they want on tutors, online courses, after school enrichment programs, anything that would help them catch up to what was lost last year. Does that sound like a good idea to you?
Yes.
Let's talk offline and see if we can get something going.
No, let me say this. The Speaker of the House believes the number one reason people of color are in trouble is because of lack of educational opportunities at all levels.
Agreed.
And I've been talking to him about some money, real money. And what you just said makes a lot of sense. Seriously. If I were you,
I'm calling them catch-up. Yeah, I'm calling them catch-up educational savings accounts. Money gets deposited to the parent. They decide what's best for the kid. Not some government-funded program that limits your options, but parents decide, what does my kid need most? And then they have the money to go get that.
You're a good man, Mike.
Ray, you are a great man for putting up with me on this almost hour-long interview, and educating me, educating, I'm sure, our audience as they view this. I hope you will share it with your audience. And can we have you back again to talk more?
Yes, and we'll send this on to Stages of Freedom's Facebook page and the like. And I thank you, and a blessing on your house.
It is so wonderful, and I hope, Ray, that in some way you and I have shown that we can profoundly disagree on a lot of things, but yet have a sometimes even fun, but more importantly, honest and civil discussion. We need more of this in our society, and I thank you for you being that way. So thank you very much, Ray. God bless. Thank you for In the Dugout. This is Mike Stenhouse. Good day.